Hello. It's an honor to address this audience of distinguished scholars and guests and to celebrate the 90th anniversary of the 1934 Yulianguan excavation. I'm Chris Hogendijk, the 8th grandson of David Crockett Graham. I knew my grandfather from when I was very young until he passed away when I was 11 years old. He lived not far from my parents' home. When I was 9 and 10, he would come by on Sunday mornings to pick me up and take me to his church. This was around 1959, and he drove an old 1938 black Ford. It was a half-hour drive to his church, and he would entertain me with stories on the ride. He was a great storyteller. He told stories about hunting a bear that was ravaging the villagers' cornfields, about encounters with bandits who turned out to know him for his good deeds. He also taught me how to count in Chinese. Other stories I found later in letters he wrote. In one letter written in 1933 to his father-in-law in New York, he related to being captured by communist army troops. There were bad relations between communists and missionaries, and this could have ended very badly. But grandfather talked to them and was able to relate to them without causing offense. They released him after just one day. From his early days in China, his immersion in the countryside and the local languages and getting to know people was always an asset. He never remained isolated within the missionary community. Family lore has it that he was fluent in 25 dialects of Chinese. His Smithsonian diaries give evidence that he was equally good at recognizing birds by their songs. Almost exactly 13 years ago, I looked up David Crockett Graham on Wikipedia and found that there was no entry for him. I decided to write that entry. I thought I knew my grandfather well, and I imagined it would take a month or so. But as I dove into this project, every week for several months, I was discovering amazing new things about him. It was 8 months before I finally posted a Wikipedia page for David Crockett Graham. I linked it to many other pages, including the page on Sanxingdui, with links back to David Crockett Graham. For some pages, like the Panda Diplomacy page, I had to do some editing and write new paragraphs or sections with links back to David Crockett Graham. There are now about 24 topic pages that reference David Crockett Graham and about a dozen category pages. While there is a lot done, there is still much to do. That project led me to a realization. If I really cared about my grandfather's legacy and making sure that history didn't forget him, then the most important thing I could do would be to make the primary source materials held by the family available to a larger audience of scholars. 2 of his daughters thought they could write a biography of him, but never got beyond research or rough sketches. Meanwhile, the primary source materials were divided among descendants and scattered. Some were lost. I didn't want to make this same mistake. Over the course of several years, I produced a couple of DVDs with 596 digitized letters with 5,476 page scans, and a DVD of 23 of Graham's diaries with 1,649 page scans. I recently added a USB key to the DVD of diaries to accommodate those who don't have a DVD drive. The Sichuan University Museum Library has copies of all of these DVDs. Knowing the work that I was doing, my brothers and cousins began sending me historical primary source materials that they had. I now have probably a couple thousand letters, many historical documents, and while there are still many boxes of materials that I haven't sorted through, I have found 10 more diaries. A couple of these diaries are very significant. For example, one contains detailed observations as Graham returned to China over the Burma Road in 1941, including Japanese bombing and its effect on local villages along the way. There's one diary that details a trip to Mount Omai, and several that have notes on Chinese religion. I hope to find more diaries and to produce a second DVD of diaries. The materials that have been sent to me include about 40 boxes from family in Tucson, Arizona, in Englewood, Colorado, and in Seneca Falls, New York. I've only managed to sort through a small portion of these. Clearly, this is more work than one person can do. With this concern, earlier this year, I formed a nonprofit David Crockett Graham Historical Fund. I'm privileged to have an outstanding group of people who've agreed to be part of this. Dr. Jay Shu is the president of the board of directors. The board of directors also includes Professor Yuanbo Peng, a 1986 graduate of the medical school, West China University of Medical Sciences in Chengdu, Michael Hogendijk, the third grandson of David Crockett Graham, Vivian Russell, the fourth great-granddaughter of David Crockett Graham, and Will Bredegum, the retired director of libraries at Amherst College. Through this nonprofit, we have initiated a work-study scholarship at Mount Holyoke College to digitize and catalog letters written by David Crockett Graham and Alicia Maury Graham during the years they were in China. A student will be working under the direction of Professor Lan Wu in the history department and will work in the archives and special collections at the Mount Holyoke College Library. We expect this work-study scholarship to be a multi-year project. I will be sending a box of letters and a box of supplies to Mount Holyoke College, which is just a few miles from where I live. The letters will be digitized, cataloged, and filed with labels identifying each letter. The catalog will be maintained as a CSV text file with metadata fields based on the Dublin core. This standard file format can be easily imported into a spreadsheet, converted to XML, or imported into a catalog system for a public archive or library. The digitized PDFs, the physical letters, and the catalog data will all be linked through the unique IDs for each letter. Ultimately, the physical letters will go to a public archive, probably at Whitman College, which is Graham's alma mater. The digitized letters and catalog will be produced in digital media, such as the DVD with a USB key, and distributed to scholars and libraries. One difficult aspect of these historical letters is that they are mostly written in cursive handwriting. David Crockett Graham's handwriting in particular can be difficult to read, even for those who are used to reading cursive. For the younger generation in the US, which hasn't been taught cursive in the schools, it is even more difficult. And for Chinese, it can seem nearly impossible. Because of this, transcription of the letters is ultimately an important project. As the letters are digitized, I'm planning on crowdsourcing transcription. A PDF can be sent to anyone, and we can access volunteers from anywhere to transcribe letters. The Smithsonian Museum has done this with field notebooks and diaries and included David Crockett Graham's Smithsonian field trip diaries in their transcription project. They have detailed guidance for transcription, and we will follow their guidelines. Having transcribed text files will make these materials accessible to a much wider audience. It will be possible to do text searches on the transcription files and automated translation into Chinese, making the digitized materials much more valuable to historians. Other projects we're working on include producing a DVD with the complete works of David Crockett Graham. With 224 works identified, I currently have 148 as PDFs. It won't be easy to complete this due to the time period in China where most of them were published. While much of what I have has come from the family archives, it may be necessary to purchase those that I don't have when they can be found online. We also have longer-term ambitions related to scholarship and student exchanges. We are currently working on raising funds for these projects, looking for donations, as well as opportunities to apply for grants. While all of this seemed overwhelming for one person, I'm encouraged by the enthusiasm and support I've received from Dr. Jay Shu, Professor Yuan Bo Peng, Dr. Beverly Bo Wu, Professor Lan Wu, family members, and many others. As these projects move forward and we get more people involved, we can look forward to having these primary source materials made available to scholars worldwide instead of being lost for another generation or perhaps forever. Thank you.